My mother threw an apron at me less than 24 hours after surgeons cut me open and told me to make dinner. God, I still remember the sound it made hitting the floor beside my hospital bag. Because that was the exact moment I realized something horrifying. My family never saw me as a daughter, only as someone useful. I was barely standing. My stitches burned every time I breathed. And there was still dried hospital tape on my wrist. But none of them cared. Not my mother, not my brother, not even my father. Then suddenly someone stepped into the doorway behind me. And the second my family saw who it was, their faces went white. Because the man standing there had the power to destroy everything they depended on. But before I tell you what happened after that, comment below. What's worse, physical pain or realizing your own family only values you when you're useful? And if you enjoy emotional family drama stories with betrayal, revenge, and powerful endings, subscribe now because this story gets intense fast. My name is Adrienne Foxwell. I was 23 years old, and the day my family finally got exposed started at the hospital. The pain in my stomach had been getting worse for days. Sharp, hot, deep. Like something twisting inside me every time I moved. But honestly, I ignored it. Because in the Foxwell house, being sick was treated like bad behavior. My mother Valerie called pain drama. My brother Preston called exhaustion laziness. And my father Howard, he called it keeping the peace. Interesting phrase, because keeping the peace usually meant allowing me to suffer quietly so nobody else got uncomfortable. I was studying nursing while working part-time at a pharmacy. Most nights I came home exhausted to overflowing dishes, laundry piles, and Preston screaming into his gaming headset while my mother scrolled through shopping websites pretending she was too overwhelmed to clean. Meanwhile, I cooked, cleaned, vacuumed, did laundry, bought groceries. God, sometimes I felt less like a daughter and more like unpaid staff trapped inside a very pretty prison. Then the pain started. At first it was manageable. Until one night I nearly collapsed while making dinner. I grabbed the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. My mother barely looked up from her phone. "Don't start with the dramatic breathing," she snapped. "I need the chicken seasoned before 6. Preston laughed while grabbing a soda. "She's gonna fake a medical emergency to avoid chores." My father heard him, saw me bent over in pain, and still said absolutely nothing. Interesting how silence becomes cruelty after enough years. 3 days later, the pain became unbearable. I was home alone trying to clean before guests arrived for one of my mother's fake perfect dinner parties. Sweat rolled down my back, my vision blurred, and halfway across the kitchen my knees gave out completely. I called my mother first. No answer, then my father, voicemail. Then Preston. He declined the call after 2 rings. God. I still remember staring at the family group chat while shaking on the kitchen floor. "I think something's seriously wrong. I need help." A minute later, my mother replied, "We're eating. Stop trying to get attention." Then Preston sent a laughing emoji. "If you can text, you can clean." I wish I could say those messages stopped hurting eventually. They didn't. I ordered a rideshare because calling an ambulance felt too expensive. Too dramatic. Too much like something my family would later use against me. The driver looked horrified the second he saw me trying to walk. At the hospital, everything moved fast. Tests, blood work, doctors, then finally the diagnosis: acute appendicitis, risk of rupture, emergency surgery immediately. I signed the forms alone, completely alone. Right before they wheeled me into surgery, I texted my mother one final time. "I'm going into surgery now." Her response came seconds later. "Adrienne, stop embarrassing yourself. We'll deal with this when you get home." God. Even now, that message still makes my chest hurt more than the scars do. And somehow, things got even worse after surgery. When I woke up after surgery, the first thing I felt wasn't relief. It was fear. God. Not fear of the stitches, not fear of the pain, fear of going back home. The recovery room lights blurred above me while machines beeped softly beside the bed. My stomach felt swollen and heavy. Every breath pulled against fresh stitches hidden beneath the bandages. A nurse adjusted my IV carefully. "Surgery went well," she whispered kindly. "But you need rest, no lifting, no stress." Interesting. Because stress was basically the Foxwell family language. She smiled gently. "Who's picking you up when you're discharged?" God, that question nearly broke me, because suddenly I realized I genuinely didn't know. A mother should have been there already. A father should have called nonstop. A brother should have panicked. Instead, my phone sat silent beside the bed, except for two unread messages from my mother. I opened the first one slowly. "Don't milk this." Then the second, "We still have guests coming Saturday." I turned my face toward the wall immediately so the nurse wouldn't see me crying, not because surgery hurt. The surgery made sense. What hurt was realizing my family only cared about how quickly I could become useful again. The next morning, Mina arrived carrying soup and enough anger for both of us. God, I have never loved anyone more in that moment. She took one look at my hospital bracelet and whispered, "Oh, Adrienne." Then my phone rang. "Mom." I ignored it instantly, but Mina saw the fear on my face and answered before I could stop her. She even put it on speaker. My mother's voice filled the hospital room, sharp and irritated. "Are you awake yet? I need to know when you're coming home because the kitchen is disgusting." Mina stared at me in complete horror. I whispered weakly, "Mom, I just had surgery." Silence. Then my mother sighed dramatically. "Every woman deals with discomfort. Stop turning this into a performance." God, even the nurse nearby froze. Mina ended the call before I started crying again. Then she looked at me and quietly asked, "If this was one of our patients, what would we call this?" I already knew the answer: neglect, emotional abuse, exploitation. Words I could recognize in textbooks but spent years refusing to apply to my own life. Mina sat beside me carefully. "Adrienne, this isn't normal." Interesting. Sometimes toxic families train you to think suffering is your personality. I stared down at my blanket silently. Then Mina asked the question that changed everything. "Is there anyone who would help you if they knew the truth?" And immediately, one name appeared in my head: Sterling Westbrook. God, even thinking his name felt dangerous. Sterling wasn't technically family. But after my grandmother died, he became trustee over the Westbrook Family Trust connected to our house, finances, and several investments my parents quietly depended on. My mother hated him. My brother mocked him. My father called him Sir. Interesting dynamic. Especially because Sterling rarely raised his voice, yet somehow terrified everyone anyway. I remembered something he told me during my high school graduation dinner years earlier. "If you're ever in real trouble, Adrienne, call me directly." I never did, because honestly, asking for help felt like betrayal after years of being trained to stay quiet. Mina held my phone out toward me. "Then call him." My hands shook while dialing. The phone rang 4 times, then Sterling answered. His voice sounded calm, controlled, sharp. "Adrienne." God, the second I heard genuine concern, I almost broke apart completely. I told him everything. The surgery, the messages, the cleaning, the dinner party, the years of doing everything while everyone watched silently. He didn't interrupt once, not once, and somehow that scared me more than yelling would have. Finally, after a long controlled silence, he asked one question. "Your mother knew you were being wheeled into surgery when she sent those messages?" "Yes." "And your father knew?" I swallowed hard. "Yes." Another silence. Then Sterling's voice became colder than I had ever heard before. "Keep every message. Photograph your discharge papers. And do not warn them I'm coming." My stomach tightened instantly. Because suddenly I realized something terrifying. Sterling wasn't angry, he was preparing something. And people like Sterling Westbrook only became this quiet right before they destroyed lives. Sterling arrived before I was even discharged. God, that alone told me how serious this had become. Most people say, "Let me know if you need anything." Sterling showed up, dark coat, leather folder, cold expression, and honestly, the second he walked into my hospital room, the entire atmosphere changed. He looked at the IV in my arm, the bruising around my wrist, the way I struggled just trying to sit upright, then quietly asked, "How long has this been happening?" Interesting question, because suddenly I realized I didn't even know how to answer it. "Years, my whole life." I stared down at the blanket. "Since I can remember." God. Saying it out loud made everything feel real for the first time. Sterling nodded once slowly. No pity, no dramatic reaction, just controlled anger. The dangerous kind. Mina handed him printed screenshots of the messages. He read every single one silently. "Stop embarrassing yourself. If you can text, you can clean. Don't milk this." The room became so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Then Sterling carefully placed the papers back into the folder and softly said something that terrified me. I want to see how they behave when they think nobody important is watching. Even Mina looked nervous after that. The ride home felt endless. Every bump in the road pulled painfully against my stitches. Mina sat beside me holding my medication bag while Sterling drove in complete silence. No music, no small talk, just tension. Heavy, terrifying tension. Interesting, I spent years thinking protection looked loud. But real protection feels calm. That somehow makes it scarier. When we reached my neighborhood, Sterling didn't park in the driveway. He stopped 2 houses away. I frowned weakly. "Why are we parking here?" He shut off the engine calmly. "Because if they see my car first, they'll perform." God, that word hit me hard, perform. Because that's exactly what my family did around outsiders. My mother became warm and elegant. Preston acted charming instead of cruel. My father pretended to be involved. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, I cooked while sick, cleaned while exhausted, and apologized for existing too loudly. Sterling stepped out first and opened my door carefully. The afternoon air felt cold against my skin. Every slow, painful step toward the house filled me with dread. Not because of surgery anymore, because I already knew what waited inside. No apology, no concern, only irritation that I hadn't returned fast enough to resume serving them. Through the front windows, I could already see preparations for my mother's dinner party. Flowers on the kitchen island, serving trays, candles. God, she really never canceled it. Mina tightened her grip around my arm supportively. "You don't have to stay if this gets bad," she whispered. But honestly, something inside me needed to see it now, needed confirmation that I wasn't crazy for feeling broken all these years. I reached the front door slowly. Before I could knock, the door flew open, and there stood my mother, Valerie Foxwell, perfect makeup, perfect hair, perfect fake smile, until she saw me. Then instantly annoyance replaced everything else. "You're finally back," she snapped. "Stop with the drama and start helping before guests arrive." God, even Sterling went still behind me. My mother barely glanced at the hospital paperwork in my hands, didn't ask how surgery went, didn't ask if I was hurting. Only looked toward the kitchen. Then Preston appeared behind her laughing into a headset. "Look who suddenly recovered." My stomach twisted painfully, not from surgery this time. Humiliation, pure humiliation. My father stood near the dining room entrance pretending to check his phone. Howard Foxwell, the professional coward. He saw the hospital bracelet, saw me barely standing upright, and still said nothing. Interesting how silence can rot a person from the inside out. My mother grabbed an apron from the hallway table and tossed it toward me. It hit my arm and fell to the floor. "You can start with the potatoes," she ordered. That was the moment my knees almost gave out completely. Not physically, emotionally, because suddenly I realized they truly believed I existed to serve them no matter what happened to my body. Then Sterling stepped fully into the doorway behind me, and the entire house went silent. The second Sterling stepped into the doorway, the entire house froze. God, I have never seen fear spread across faces so fast before. My mother's expression collapsed instantly. Preston lowered his headset, and my father actually stood up straight like an employee being caught stealing from his boss. Interesting. Because suddenly, the people who controlled me their entire lives looked terrified themselves. Sterling glanced down at the apron lying near my feet, then at me barely standing upright, then finally at my mother. His voice stayed terrifyingly calm. "Did you just order a woman fresh out of surgery to cook dinner for you?" Nobody answered. Not immediately. The silence stretched so long even the guests in the living room stopped talking. Then my mother forced a nervous laugh. "Sterling, this is just family misunderstanding." "No," he interrupted quietly. "It isn't." God, that tone, soft, controlled, cold. Some people become loud when angry. Sterling became quieter, which honestly felt much worse. He stepped farther into the hallway slowly while removing his gloves one finger at a time. "I heard every word outside," he continued. "So let's not insult each other by pretending." Preston scoffed weakly. "She's exaggerating. She always acts helpless." Sterling turned toward him slowly, and honestly, I think Preston regretted speaking immediately. "She had emergency abdominal surgery yesterday," Sterling said calmly. "And your first instinct was to mock her?" Preston shifted uncomfortably. "It was a joke." "No," Sterling answered. "It was cruelty disguised as normal behavior." God. Hearing someone finally say it out loud nearly made me cry, because toxic families train you to believe abuse is personality. My mother crossed her arms defensively. Adrienne has always been dramatic about discomfort. Interesting choice of words, discomfort. Like surgeons hadn't literally cut into my body 20 hours earlier. Sterling opened his leather folder calmly, then held up printed screenshots of their text messages. My stomach dropped instantly, because suddenly everything became real, public, visible, undeniable. He read the messages aloud one by one. Stop embarrassing yourself. If you can text, you can clean. Don't milk this. God, the words sounded even uglier spoken out loud. My mother's face flushed red instantly. That's out of context. Sterling ignored her completely. Instead, he held up my discharge papers. Patient requires rest. No lifting. Monitor for internal bleeding. Then he looked directly at Preston. Would you like to explain why you accused her of faking exhaustion after receiving these instructions? Preston's confidence disappeared immediately. I didn't know it was that serious. Mina laughed sharply beside me. She had a hospital bracelet on her wrist. Beautiful silence followed that sentence. My father still hadn't spoken. Interesting. Cowards always hope silence will protect them. Then Sterling finally turned toward him. You knew she was in surgery? Howard swallowed hard. Yes. And yet you still allowed this behavior. My father looked down at the floor instantly. God, for the first time in my life, I saw shame on his face. Real shame, but honestly, it arrived years too late. Sterling connected his phone to the television in the living room. My mother immediately panicked. What are you doing? Still no answer. The screen lit up with financial records, trust accounts, household expenses, payment summaries, and suddenly my mother stopped breathing normally. Interesting. Because now the conversation wasn't only emotional anymore, it was financial. Dangerous. Sterling zoomed into expense reports slowly. Designer purchases, luxury decor, expensive dinners, subscription boxes, thousands of dollars. Meanwhile, I worked pharmacy shifts and cleaned their messes until midnight. My mother tried recovering her composure. These are household expenses. Sterling zoomed in further. $1,200 for decorative lamps, $800 for catered brunches, 3 luxury spa memberships. Then calmly, he asked the question that shattered her completely. Which one of these purchases mattered more than your daughter's surgery? God. My mother actually looked speechless for the first time in her life. Then Sterling opened another file. Preston's expenses, gaming equipment, fuel cards, insurance payments, food delivery charges, all paid through accounts connected to the Westbrook Trust. Preston sat upright immediately. What does this have to do with Adrienne? Sterling looked directly at him. Everything. Then quietly added. You've spent years living comfortably while the only person actually contributing to this household was treated like unpaid labor. That sentence hit the room like a bomb, because suddenly the truth wasn't hidden anymore. Not behind family responsibilities, not behind helping out, just exploitation, raw, ugly exploitation. Then Sterling closed the folder slowly and said the sentence that changed my family forever. Effective immediately, the trust is freezing all discretionary household support. For a second, nobody in the room moved. God, even the guests in the living room went completely silent after hearing Sterling's announcement. My mother blinked rapidly. What? Sterling remained calm, too calm. The discretionary trust accounts are frozen effective immediately, he repeated. No more luxury spending, no more household coverage, no more automatic payments. Interesting, because suddenly the woman who spent years controlling everyone else looked completely helpless. My mother laughed nervously. You can't be serious. I'm extremely serious. God, the color drained from her face instantly. Preston stood up aggressively. You can't just shut everything off. Sterling slowly turned toward him. The car you drive, trust-owned. Your fuel card, trust-funded. Your phone bill, also trust-funded. Preston's mouth literally fell open. Then Sterling calmly added, all of it ends tonight. Beautiful silence. Absolute beautiful silence. My brother looked toward my father desperately, like a child searching for rescue, but my father looked just as terrified. Interesting. The people who ignored my suffering for years suddenly panicked the moment consequences touched them. My mother's voice cracked. "Sterling, this is extreme." "No," he answered quietly. "What's extreme is forcing your daughter to clean and cook while stitches are still fresh in her body." God, the entire room felt heavy after that. Sterling opened another file calmly. More financial records appeared on the television. This time my father went pale immediately. Expense approvals, misclassified trust spending, private purchases hidden as household support. My stomach twisted, because honestly, I didn't even realize how much money had quietly flowed through that house while I worked pharmacy shifts to buy my own textbooks. Sterling looked directly at my father. "You approved these charges?" Howard rubbed his forehead shakily. "Yes." Without reviewing them, silence. Then finally my father whispered, "I didn't want arguments." Interesting, that sentence explained my entire childhood. Not love. Not protection, avoidance. He sacrificed me because confronting my mother felt uncomfortable. Sterling nodded slowly. "So your solution was allowing your daughter to become unpaid labor while everyone else lived comfortably." My father lowered his head completely. And honestly, that was the first moment I stopped feeling guilty for being angry at him. Because suddenly I realized weakness can hurt people just as badly as cruelty. My mother started crying, real tears this time. But even then, something about them felt selfish. Not sadness for me, fear for herself. "You're humiliating us," she whispered. Sterling looked at her coldly. "No, Valerie, you humiliated yourselves." God. I don't think anyone breathed after that. Then Sterling calmly reached into the folder again. "Preston," he said quietly, "the vehicle you drive will be collected tomorrow morning." My brother exploded instantly. "What? It's registered under a trust-owned company. You have no employment, no payment history, and no entitlement to continue using it." Preston actually looked ready to panic. "That car is mine." "No," Sterling answered. "You were borrowing stability from a family system you contributed nothing to." God, that line nearly destroyed him. Meanwhile, I sat there barely able to process what was happening. For years I thought I was weak, overdramatic, ungrateful. But suddenly, someone was finally exposing the truth. I wasn't the burden in that house. I was the person carrying it. Then Sterling turned toward my mother again. "As for the house," the room froze instantly. "You and Preston may remain here for 30 days under written financial conditions. After that, either you contribute documented expenses or you leave." My mother covered her mouth. "Sterling, please," he ignored her. "If either of you harasses Adrienne again, the 30 days become 7. Beautiful silence filled the room again, because suddenly, the people who spent years controlling me realized they no longer had power. My father finally spoke weakly. "What happens now?" Sterling looked toward me, not them, me, and softly said, "Now Adrienne finally gets the chance to heal." The next morning, the Foxwell house no longer felt powerful. God. For the first time in my life, it felt fragile. Quiet, like the walls themselves finally understood the truth. At 9 a.m., 2 men arrived to collect Preston's car, and honestly, watching my brother panic was surreal. He ran onto the porch in sweatpants screaming there had to be a mistake. "There's paperwork," he snapped. "My dad approved everything." One of the men calmly handed him the repossession documents. "Vehicle belongs to Westbrook Trust Holdings." Interesting, because suddenly, the man who spent years mocking me for overreacting looked seconds away from crying over losing a car he never paid for. Preston turned toward my father desperately. "Dad, say something!" But my father just stood there silently again. God. He spent his whole life avoiding conflict, and now conflict had finally swallowed him whole. The tow truck slowly pulled Preston's precious SUV down the street while neighbors watched through windows. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. My mother stayed upstairs most of the morning pretending to have a migraine. Interesting timing. Especially because she somehow survived luxury shopping trips perfectly fine for years. But now, consequences suddenly made her too weak to function. By noon, the house started changing in ways that felt almost unreal. Laundry baskets overflowed because nobody touched them. Dirty dishes piled inside the sink. Takeout containers sat untouched on tables. And for the first time, I did absolutely nothing about it. God. That part felt harder than surgery somehow. Because toxic homes train you to panic when you stop serving people. Mina stayed beside me upstairs while I recovered in bed. Every few hours, she checked my medication schedule like an actual caring person. Interesting how shocking kindness feels after years without it. Then around sunset, my father knocked softly on my bedroom door, not barged in. Not demanded something, knocked, that alone felt unfamiliar. "Can I come in?" I looked up slowly. Howard Foxwell suddenly looked older, smaller somehow, like guilt physically aged him overnight. He stepped inside, carefully holding a cup of tea. God, I almost laughed, because after years of silence, now suddenly he wanted to act gentle. "I'm sorry, Adrienne," he whispered. There it was, the apology I spent years wanting. And honestly, it didn't fix anything. I stared at him quietly. "You watched them do this to me." His eyes filled instantly. "I know, no," I answered softly. "You knew, and you stayed silent anyway." Beautiful silence followed that sentence. Because finally, someone else had to sit inside discomfort for once. My father sat slowly near the window. "I thought keeping peace was protecting the family." Interesting, people always rename cowardice into something softer. "You protected yourself," I whispered. God, that sentence broke him completely. He covered his face with his hands while crying quietly. And honestly, for the first time in my life, I didn't comfort him. That shocked me more than anything else. Because suddenly I realized healing sometimes means refusing to carry guilt that belongs to other people. My father finally looked up again. "Sterling froze everything," he admitted weakly. "The trust, the expense approvals, even work accounts connected to family reimbursements." I nodded silently. "Good." Then he whispered something even sadder. "I didn't realize how much pressure you were under." God, that hurt. Because honestly, he did know, he just chose not to look directly at it. Interesting how people confuse not wanting to see with innocence. Before leaving the room, my father paused near the doorway, then quietly asked, "Do you hate me?" I looked at him for a very long time, and honestly, the answer wasn't simple anymore. "No," I finally whispered, "but I don't trust you either." His face crumpled after hearing that. Good. Because trust should hurt once broken. Later that night, Sterling arrived again, this time carrying apartment papers. My stomach tightened immediately. "What's this?" "You're leaving this house," he answered calmly. Silence. God. Even hearing the words felt unreal. "I found a furnished apartment 10 minutes from campus. 6 months paid. No obligations." I stared at him speechlessly, because suddenly freedom looked terrifying. Interesting. People raised in chaos often fear peace at first. My mother overheard from the hallway instantly. "You're taking her away from her family?" Sterling slowly turned toward her. "No, Valerie, I'm removing her from exploitation." God. The silence after that felt holy. The morning I left the Foxwell house, nobody tried to stop me. God, that hurt more than screaming would have. No dramatic apologies, no begging, no promises to change, just silence. Interesting. After years of making me responsible for everyone else's comfort, they suddenly had nothing to say once I chose myself. Mina helped pack my clothes into boxes while Sterling handled paperwork downstairs. Everything I owned fit into one bedroom worth of storage bins, nursing textbooks, scrubs, a few framed photos, and the little wooden box of letters my grandmother wrote before she died. That was it. Years of serving that house, and almost nothing inside it truly belonged to me. As I zipped my final bag, my mother appeared quietly in the doorway. Valerie Foxwell looked exhausted for the first time in her life. No makeup. No polished smile, no fake elegance, just panic. "You're really leaving?" she whispered. God, even then she sounded offended instead of heartbroken. I looked around the bedroom slowly. The room where I studied until 2 a.m. Cried quietly into pillows. Collapsed exhausted after cleaning up everyone else's mess. "Yes," I answered calmly. My mother crossed her arms defensively. "You're acting like we abused you." Interesting. Even after everything, she still needed to minimize my pain to protect herself from guilt. "You ordered me to cook while I was bleeding under bandages," I whispered. Silence. Beautiful silence. Then my mother actually said something unbelievable. "We were trying to make you stronger." God, that sentence changed something inside me permanently, because suddenly I realized toxic people always rename cruelty into love. Control becomes guidance. Exploitation becomes responsibility. Suffering becomes character building. I looked directly at her. "No," I answered softly. "You were teaching me that my pain didn't matter. My mother's eyes filled instantly. But honestly, the tears no longer moved me. Too many years had passed. Then quietly she asked the question I think terrified her most. Are you going to forgive us? God, I thought about it carefully, about the surgery, the texts, the years of exhaustion, the way nobody came to the hospital, the apron hitting the floor beside my pain medication. Then finally, I gave the only honest answer possible. I don't know, because healing isn't immediate. And forgiveness without accountability is just permission for more damage. Sterling loaded the last box into the car while Mina hugged me tightly. The morning air felt different somehow. Lighter. Like my body already understood freedom before my mind caught up. Then my father walked outside quietly. Howard looked nervous, holding a small envelope in his hand. I found these in your grandmother's things, he said softly. Inside were old handwritten letters. One sentence from my grandmother hit me harder than anything else. Never stay where your kindness is treated like obligation. God, I nearly cried right there on the driveway. Because suddenly, I realized I had spent years trying to earn basic love from people who only valued usefulness. Sterling opened the passenger door for me calmly. And as the car pulled away, I looked back at the Foxwell house one final time. Interesting, for years I thought leaving would feel tragic. Instead, it felt peaceful. The apartment Sterling found for me wasn't fancy. Small kitchen. Secondhand couch, one bedroom, but God, it was quiet. No yelling, no criticism. No one demanding things from me. That first night I made soup only because I wanted soup, not because someone ordered me to cook, and honestly, I cried while eating it, because freedom feels strange when chaos raised you. Over the next few months, everything changed. Preston got a warehouse job after losing his car and trust-funded lifestyle. My mother took a retail position at a furniture store. And my father started therapy after Sterling forced financial oversight onto every account connected to the household. Interesting how quickly people discover responsibility once nobody else carries them anymore. As for me, I healed, slowly, quietly, properly. I returned to nursing school, started sleeping through the night again, stopped apologizing for resting, and eventually I understood something powerful. The real revenge wasn't watching my family lose money. It was realizing I was never the weak one in that house. I was the person holding everything together while they called me dramatic for collapsing under the weight. Before you go, comment below, would you forgive a family that only loved you when you were useful? And if this story hit you emotionally, subscribe for more powerful family drama stories, emotional betrayals, and satisfying endings from sad drama stories.